This is a cowl with a twist. It is made using Tunisian crochet and super chunky yarn, and as a result it works up extremely quickly and the whole thing can be completed in a few hours. The stitch I have used is called the bump stitch, sometimes also known as the top stitch. It produces this lovely airy fabric that has a mesh-like appearance and is nice and drapey, perfect for a cowl or scarf. Not only is the stitch very attractive on the front, it is also a lovely stitch on the reverse side, perfect for a cowl with a twist where both sides will be visible. The bump stitch can be done with any number of stitches, even or odd, and all the rows are identical. To make the cowl I used 100% acrylic super chunky yarn that suggests a 10mm crochet hook and 200 grams of yarn, that is 2 balls, were required. But because the cowl is made using Tunisian crochet, I have used an 11mm Tunisian crochet hook that is 14 inches long. Other essential equipment are a tape measure, a 9mm conventional crochet hook for slip stitching the edges of the cowl together, a pair of scissors, and a large needle with a wide eye for sewing in loose ends. And as always, a stitch marker. The dimensions I am aiming for are 14 inches wide and a length of around 30 inches. To achieve a length of 14 inches, I needed to crochet a foundation chain of 28. Is indeed 14 inches. The next step is to bring up loops for the Tunisian crochet foundation row, and because it is a chain of 28, there will be 28 loops on the hook. And I am doing it the easy way by bringing up the loops by pushing the hook through the top loop and not the back bump, as it will produce a better result when slip stitching the edges of the fabric together. At this stage it is essential to check the number of loops on the hook, and there are indeed 28. Now for the return pass, chain 1, and it is, in my opinion, essential to mark the end of the row so I will know exactly where to place the last stitch of the forward pass. This is the return pass being completed with one loop left on the hook. This stitch I'm using for the cowl is the bump stitch. Look at the top horizontal row with 2 bars or strands. There's one at the front, and then the one at the back has a bump, and this is situated just above the vertical bar. So I'm going to push the crochet hook under the bump. Can be a bit tricky for the first stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop. So that is the first bump stitch. And for the next stitch exactly the same, push the hook under the horizontal back bump, yarn over, pull up a loop. The stitches all along the row are identical, push the hook under the next back bump, yarn over, pull up a loop. Sometimes it can be a little tricky to decide where the back bump is, so the clues are it is directly above the vertical bar and it is a bump and it is at the back. And keep going, working into the back bumps along the row until the final back bump and that I'm going to miss, and instead work into the marked stitch at the edge of the row. This way both sides of the fabric will be much neater. Now chain one and mark the space between the two bars on the left and one bar on the right. Yarn over and pull through two loops, yarn over, pull through two loops, and continue with a normal Tunisian return pass. A top tip is, because the horizontal bars in the back bump are being created during the return pass, keep the return pass quite loose, otherwise it will be difficult working into the back bump if it is too tight. Now for the next forward pass, which will be exactly the same as the previous, so push the hook under the back bump of the above the second vertical bar, yarn over, pull up a loop. You can see how the really attractive bump stitch is manifesting itself now. If the stitch is a bit tight, just pull up the back bump a little with the fingers to create room for the hook. And keep going with the forward passes until the cowl is of the desired length. In this case I'm aiming for 30 inches, but some may prefer it longer, some may prefer it shorter. So I'm coming to the end of my 44th forward pass and approaching the end of my second ball of yarn, so I shall just check the stitch count to make sure that it is still 28 and then do a final return pass and measure the length of the fabric. And the length of the fabric is 30 inches. And now it is time to join the opposite ends of the cowl together. So I am going to put a twist in it, otherwise the cowl would resemble a huge clerical collar. Normally I would slip stitch the final return pass to neaten up the edge of a scarf, but in my opinion for this project a better cosmetic result will be achieved by using the vertical bars from the return pass for slip stitching to the opposite edge of the cowl. And for that I'm going to use a 9mm conventional crochet hook, like so. I have one loop on the hook. Now I'm going to push the hook into the space between the two vertical bars and then under the front loop of the stitch on the opposite side, yarn over and pull through, leaving one loop on the hook. Now for the second slip stitch, insert the hook behind the front vertical bar of the next stitch and then push the hook under the next front loop on the opposite side. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So that is the second slip stitch. Now for the next slip stitch, insert the hook behind the next vertical bar and now push the hook behind the front loop of the next stitch on the other side. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And just carry on slip stitching along until the end of the row. The final slip stitch goes into the marked space at the edge of the row, then push the hook into the edge of the row on the other side, yarn over and pull through all the loops. And this is what the seam looks like. It is very neat, and I think easier than just sewing the edges together. And with slip stitching, is still working with the same continuous piece of yarn, so if necessary the whole thing can be undone. Finally, use the wide-eyed needle to sew in any loose ends. And this is the finished result in situ, the Tunisian Crochet Bump Stitch Cowl with a twist. I hope you like it.